Now we're using squash soup. It's almost done. I have like this 1 gallon left, and then it's gonna be our frozen tomato soups.
I'm standing in Hock, spelled H-O-Q, short for Chef Suman Hock's last name, spelled H-O-Q-U-E.
French fries, all the potatoes from here.
Oh, that's all cut.
Yeah, we cut it.
It's a restaurant in Des Moines, specializing in using locally grown food.
Over 90%, except like salmon, is not from Iowa.
Hock is an immigrant from Bangladesh. He's a businessman and owns Hock and Flora, a restaurant in the Des Moines Botanical Gardens. He also runs a busy food truck at the downtown farmers market, sold 5,000 lamb and chicken wraps during the Iowa State Fair, and 7,000 more at Ragbri last year.
I'm getting shrimp from Iowa pretty soon. Somebody's raising shrimp in Iowa. Lemon, lime, oranges, chocolate, it's not from Iowa. Salt, pepper is not from Iowa, other than everything else.
In other words, Hock is a very busy man, and yet he chooses to spend a huge amount of his time sourcing local foods. He contacts farmers, organizes deliveries, and freezes locally grown food so he can use the produce year-round, even in the off-season.
I love it because otherwise it's easy. You just go to the computer and buy stuff from the big distributor. It's no fun. When you buy from the big distributor, you don't talk to anybody. I talk to like 10, 15 different farmers every day. Like somebody texts me every morning, like, hey, I have some spinach. I said, oh, I'll take 5 pounds of spinach.
But as we'll learn in this episode, which is the first in a 2-part series about restaurants in Iowa, what Suman and a handful of restaurants do to procure food is not the norm. Most restaurants take what Suman sees as the easy route. They type on a computer and the food arrives. Today we'll look at why that is and the impact it has on our state. And to entice you to listen to the second episode next week, that's when I'll dive into how and why we're going to change that equation and the incredible people leading that charge. I'm Beth Hoffman, author, journalist, and farmer. At the Iowa Farm Table is a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition, a group of more than 50 organizations in the state working to make the food system more just, equitable, and sustainable.
So I'm Austin Frerick. I'm the author of Barron's Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry.
So let's go back about 75 years ago to the 1940s. At that time, restaurants were a novelty, a place to go for special occasions or when you were far from home.
Before World War II, Americans really didn't eat out. And if you did, you brought a dish. So it's like you go into a church function, funeral, wedding, what have you. And, if you're rich, you might be like traveling, staying at a tavern, eat there. But that was kind of the extent of eating out.
Then came World War II, and life in the U.S. changed dramatically. Women were not home as much and were looking for ways to save time.
You have a combination of women entering the workforce, but also the rise of frozen food that allows eating out, where you can have all these different products from different regions that can be frozen and cooked. And so then you see this growth in eating out in America. And that's really turbocharged in the last few decades, where now the average American eats out almost once a day.
In 2023, Americans spent almost 60% of their food budget on eating out. So how did such growth happen? As Frerick mentioned, frozen food became popular. TV dinners became a thing. And people realized food like berries could be effectively frozen at the height of freshness. But there was another important innovation that changed America as well.
Everyone thinks of Amazon as the everything store, but Cisco was the original everything store.
It all started with a man named John Baugh, who owned a frozen food company. One day when he delivered food to a hotel, he watched the food manager accepting deliveries. Baugh saw on the man's desk a complicated grid outlining all of the different places he had to get his supplies.
The founder of Cisco, John Baugh, realized the frozen berry is frozen berry. I don't really have a competitive advantage there, but what I can do is make this guy's life as simple as possible, offer as much as possible, like make an everything store.
But Baugh knew that there was no way he could make everything himself. Instead, his plan was to acquire companies that offered those things. So in 1969, he bought and merged 9 different companies into one.
So instead of having 20 vendors, you can have one. So that's how Cisco was created. It actually started through the merger of 9 different companies. Since then, the whole point of Cisco has been it doesn't compete, it acquires. So it's bought over like 200 and some companies. And so if it sees that Asian food's taken off in America, it'll buy an Asian food provider. Or it got into the hotel business. So those little soaps you see at hotels, it acquired one of those.
Which means, of course, that Asian food in Kansas City is often the same Asian food you find in Buffalo, New York, purchased frozen. And that soap in Palm Beach might look local, but it's the same as the soap in Palm Springs because, well, they all came from the same place. Cisco and several other companies act as what are now called Broadliners, offering a broad assortment of goods, everything a restaurant might need. Jill Bebout is a farmer in south central Iowa. Her farm, Blue Gate, grows an enormous array of vegetables, but she doesn't grow enough of any one vegetable for many restaurants to deal with.
Because we're such a highly diversified produce farm, we don't have a single crop that we have a bulk amount of except our asparagus.
A broadliner like Cisco can deliver broccoli or beets year-round. Every potato will be similar in size and shape, as are the chicken breasts and the tenderloins. Customers can come in every time and get, in effect, the same sandwich month after month, year after year.
We do have a higher than average priced product, so it does limit how many restaurants are interested and willing to pay the price that we need to get for that.
And broadliners are also typically cheaper. They deal in huge volume, so each individual radish can be sold for less.
It's not necessarily feasible for us to outreach to more restaurants. It doesn't really pencil out.
And so what you're seeing is it's really hard for local food to get into that ecosystem.
Again, that's Austin Frerick. He says small farms like Blue Gate Farm are just way too small for a huge company like Cisco to deal with. They simply can't compete with large-scale producers or, of course, with slave labor.
Yeah, there's been a lot of documentation over the years from both journalists and activist groups just highlighting the extent of slave labor used in a lot of the seafood products Cisco sells. Like an American fisherman doing it right, you can't compete on price against that. You can't compete against slave labor.
Over the years, many examples of exploitative and slave labor in India, Thailand, and other countries have come to light. Cisco and other companies have been found to benefit from such supply chains, often because it's impossible for such a vast system to know what's going on at the boat level. Frerick explained to me that the root of the problem is that the guardrails have collapsed. There are very few rules and regulations that still exist against exploitative practices.
What I've really come to internalize is the guardrails exist to prevent us from the worst of ourselves. Because if you don't, start selling that slave labor shrimp, well, someone else will, and you lose that sale. Because at the end of the day, that person buying that dinner with shrimp in it, they don't know. They have bigger fish to fry. They're working a 9 to 5. They don't have the time to know the production standards of the food item. They're just looking at the price.
Of course, slave labor is the most egregious problem with this kind of system. But on an everyday level for most Iowans, the system has also failed us in very tangible ways. Again, Austin Frerick.
I just had a moment about 10 years ago in Atlantic, Iowa, in the western part of the state. I was at a diner, and the meal I had, I realized none of this food's from here. Yeah, I'm surrounded by some of the best farmland in America. And it's like all this industrial meat, industrial produce, and how meh it also tasted.
How meh it all tasted. I think about that a lot when I eat out. How come the food doesn't taste better? And why do all the restaurants, particularly in rural areas, seem to serve the same exact tenderloins, French fries, chicken wings? Frerick offered a new word he learned for it, a word he says was adopted from the tech industry.
It's called enshittification. Enshittification. It was coined by this tech reformer, which is how the platforms start off good and then they just they chase greed and they just start getting really shitty. Cisco used to offer a really good product line and really convenient. Never forget the convenience of it. Don't discount it. But now it's like the phrase, tonight's dinner fell off the Cisco truck.
It's a dinner that fell off the truck, into the freezer, then into the fryer, and onto your plate.
We've all had that meal.
And as a result, small-scale farms have all but vanished, taking with them our rural populations. Okay, enough with the doom and gloom. In part 2 of this series, we're going to ask, how can Iowa restaurants bust out of that norm and begin to offer delicious meals sourced from Iowa's farms? We'll talk about all of the interesting ways people like Suman Hawk are innovating to provide more flavorful meals that all Iowans can be proud of. I discovered an amazing array of forward-thinking Iowans, hard at work, changing the system for the better. And if all goes well, it could be the start of turning Iowa into one of the food capitals of the United States. Thanks so much to Suman Hawk of Hawk, Jill Bebout of Blue Gate Farms, and Austin Frerick. You can find out more information and links to all of them in our show notes. John Hoagland and Tommy Hexter edited this episode. You've been listening to At the Iowa Farm Table, a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition. If you like this or any of our episodes, please like them in your podcast player and tell a friend or two. You can sign up for the Iowa Food System Coalition newsletter by going to our website at iowafoodSystemCoalition.org. And, of course, you can follow us on social media. I'm Beth Hoffman. Thank you so much for listening.